I never expected the courtroom to go silent so fast. One moment, my ex-husband Dylan Reeves was standing confidently in front of the judge, telling her that I was using our kids as pawns. The next moment, my 8-year-old son, Ollie, pushed back his chair, stood up, and said in the clearest voice I have ever heard from him, "Your Honor, Dad texted me this morning. He said if I testify for him, he'll buy me a car. If I don't, he'll make sure I never go to college. Can I show you?" And the judge, who had looked concerned just seconds earlier, extended her hand toward him. The entire courtroom froze. Even Dylan's lawyer shut his briefcase like he already knew everything was about to fall apart. My name is Maya Carter, and before today, I thought I had learned every emotional blow my ex could throw at me. We had been in and out of family court for almost 2 years, fighting over custody of our 2 children, 8-year-old Oliver Ollie Reeves and his 5-year-old sister Hazel. Dylan was the kind of man who could switch personalities the way someone changes shirts. In public, he was charming, well-spoken, and always ready with a smile that made strangers think he was a devoted father. In private, he was critical, manipulative, and frighteningly good at twisting the truth until I questioned my own memory. Our marriage had ended long before the divorce papers were signed. But one thing I never imagined was standing in court, listening to Dylan accuse me of weaponizing our kids when all I had ever done was protect them from his emotional swings. I walked into the courtroom that morning knowing the stakes were high. I had barely slept. My palms shook on the steering wheel the entire drive there, and Hazel clung to my side like she could sense the storm waiting inside the courthouse. I kept telling myself, "Stay calm, Maya. You've done nothing wrong. The truth will hold." But when Dylan started talking, my confidence wavered. He stood there wearing a tailored navy suit, acting like he was the wounded one. His voice cracked in all the right places as he told the judge, Honorable Judge Marissa Blake, that I had turned the children against him. He said, "Your Honor, I try so hard to be a good father, but Maya keeps poisoning them. She tells them I'm dangerous, that I'm mean. She uses them as pawns in her emotional war." His lawyer nodded solemnly beside him, as if they were presenting some well-researched scientific case instead of a string of lies. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but before I could say a word, Dylan pulled out printed screenshots of text messages I had sent weeks earlier about school schedules and bedtime routines. He twisted each one into something sinister. When the judge turned to look at me, her expression held a flicker of doubt, and that flicker terrified me. Hazel pressed her face into my arm, whispering softly, "Mommy, can we go home?" I stroked her hair and whispered back, "Soon, sweetheart." But inside, I was breaking. I felt like I was watching the ground beneath me shift, just like it always had when Dylan controlled the narrative. What none of us expected was Ollie. My son had been sitting quietly beside me, feet dangling inches above the floor, his small hands folded in his lap. I assumed he was lost in his own thoughts or trying to distract himself from the tension in the room. But when Dylan said, "She pressures Oliver to say bad things about me," something in Ollie snapped. His head lifted, his shoulders straightened, and before I even realized he was moving, he stood up. He didn't look at me for reassurance. He didn't ask for permission. He simply turned toward the judge with a courage I have never seen from him. His voice was clear, steady, and heartbreakingly honest. "Your Honor, that's not true. Mom never tells me to say anything." The judge paused. Everyone paused. Then Ollie continued, holding up his tablet. "But Dad texted me this morning. He said if I help him in court, he'll buy me a car when I'm 16. And if I don't help him, he'll make sure I never go to college. I don't want to lie, so I saved them. Do you want to see?" Gasps echoed through the courtroom. In that single moment, everything changed. The power shifted. The lie Dylan had built so carefully cracked open. And Judge Blake's outstretched hand told me she already sensed the truth. That was the moment my son's bravery turned the entire case upside down. The morning of the hearing felt heavier than any court date we had faced before. I woke up long before my alarm, staring at the ceiling, knowing the day would decide more than schedules and visitation. It would decide whether my children would grow up anchored to stability or pulled deeper into the emotional tug-of-war Dylan had created. I could feel the weight of every previous hearing sitting on my chest. Some mornings, I could convince myself I was strong enough. That morning, I felt like I was walking into a storm without shelter. I got dressed quietly, choosing a simple navy blouse and dark slacks. Nothing flashy, nothing that could be twisted into, "she's trying too hard." I had learned to anticipate every accusation Dylan might throw. As I brushed my hair into a low ponytail, I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the tired eyes looking back at me. I whispered to myself, "You're doing this for the kids. That's all that matters." In the kitchen, Ollie was already awake, sitting at the table with a bowl of cereal he wasn't eating. His legs swung slowly under the chair, and he stared at the table as if trying to solve a puzzle only he could see. His hair stuck up on one side, and he didn't make eye contact when I approached. "You okay, buddy?" I asked softly. He shrugged. "Just nervous." Then he added, "I don't like when Dad gets mad in court." Hazel padded in, next holding her stuffed rabbit, Clover, by the ear. She climbed into my lap and tucked her head under my chin. "Mommy, do we have to see Daddy today?" she whispered. I kissed the top of her head. "Yes, sweetheart, but I'll be with you the whole time. You're safe with me." Hazel nodded a little, though her tiny hands stayed wrapped tightly around Clover. She was only 5, but she already knew too much about tension, arguments, and courtroom whispers. I wanted her world to be filled with playground laughter and bedtime stories, not legal paperwork and custody hearings. My older brother, Ethan, knocked on the door exactly at 7:30. He lived 20 minutes away, but always showed up early on hearing days. He stood in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee and a reassuring smile that didn't quite hide his worry. "You ready?" he asked. I exhaled slowly. "As ready as I'll ever be." Ethan walked inside and whispered, "Whatever happens today, you're not alone. I've got you. The kids have you. Dylan doesn't get to rewrite reality." I nodded, grateful for him. He had seen the collapse of my marriage in real time. He saw the nights I cried on the phone, the moments Dylan's coldness cut deeper than his anger, the times I tried to hold the family together even when it was already breaking apart. Ethan had been my anchor when everything else felt like shifting sand. On the drive to the courthouse, Ollie sat quietly in the back seat, staring out the window. Hazel leaned against him, still holding Clover. Every so often I glanced at them in the rearview mirror. Their innocence contrasted sharply with the adult world they were being forced to navigate. When we pulled into the parking lot, Ollie spoke up. "Mom? Yeah? If the judge asks me something, can I tell the truth, even if Dad gets mad?" My breath caught in my throat. "Of course you can tell the truth," I said gently. "You don't have to protect anyone's feelings in that room. Your job is just to be honest." Ollie nodded, though I could see the conflict behind his eyes. He loved his father, even if that love was tangled with fear and confusion. He didn't want to hurt either of us. That was the cruelest part of Dylan's manipulation. He put an 8-year-old in the impossible position of choosing which parent would be angry with him. Inside the courthouse lobby, we went through security. Hazel reached for my hand immediately. Ollie walked beside Ethan, who whispered stories about fishing trips to keep him distracted. I appreciated it more than I could say. When we entered the courtroom, Dylan was already there. He sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, looking polished and confident. His tie was perfect, his posture relaxed, like he was attending a business meeting instead of a hearing that could redefine our children's lives. The moment he saw us, he gave Ollie a familiar smile, the one that tried to say, "Remember who's on, your side." Ollie didn't smile back. He stayed close to Ethan, his fingers tightening slightly around the edge of his tablet. I felt a rush of protectiveness surge through me. I took my seat, smoothing my blouse to steady my hands. Judge Blake entered shortly after, her presence instantly commanding the room. Her calm face made no hint of the whirlwind about to unfold. In that moment, I had no idea how dramatically the day would shift. I didn't know that my son would soon reveal something that would tear Dylan's entire case apart. All I knew was that I had to stay present, stay strong, and keep breathing, because the storm was coming, and I was praying my children wouldn't be swept up in it. When the clerk called our case and Judge Blake settled into her seat, a hush fell over the courtroom. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and I could feel Hazel's small hand gripping the fabric of my sleeve. Ollie sat upright beside Ethan, holding his tablet against his chest like he already knew it would matter. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, steady and unrelenting. Dylan stood first. He buttoned his suit jacket with the confidence of someone stepping onto a stage, not into a courtroom. His lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Preston Hale, rose beside him and gave a courteous nod toward the judge. "Your Honor," Preston began, "we are here today because Mr. Reeves has growing concerns about the emotional environment the children are exposed to while in Ms. Carter's custody." I stiffened, but I kept my expression neutral. I had learned that reacting only fueled Dylan's performance. Preston continued, "Mr. Reeves is worried that the children are being influenced to fear or reject him. He believes Ms. Carter uses them as leverage to maintain control." That word, control, hit like a punch to the ribs. Dylan, of all people, accusing someone else of controlling behavior, felt like some twisted theatrical performance. He stared at me with a carefully crafted look of disappointment, as if I had personally betrayed him. Then Dylan stepped forward. His act had begun. "Your Honor," he said with a voice dripping with false sincerity, "I have done everything I can to be a present father. I love my kids. I show up. I try to create stability. But every time I make progress, Maya sabotages it. She tells them I'm unreliable, that I'm dangerous, that I care more about myself than them. She pressures Oliver to report negative things about me. She has turned this into a war." I wanted to speak. I wanted to stand up and shout, "That's not true!" But I knew better than to interrupt. Judge Blake's eyes lowered slightly, studying Dylan like she was evaluating every syllable. Preston then slid several pages across the judge's bench. "These text message records," he said, "illustrate a pattern of behavior where Ms. Carter denies reasonable requests, limits communication, and speaks negatively about Mr. Reeves." I recognized the texts instantly. They were harmless messages about homework, bedtime, and picking up Hazel's prescription. Preston had highlighted random phrases like, "They need calm after yesterday's incident," and was using them as evidence of conflict. He twisted context into accusation, like turning a family grocery list into a criminal confession. Judge Blake adjusted her glasses and read quietly. Her expression stayed neutral, but that neutrality scared me. Every judge had limited time. Every judge wanted clarity, and Dylan was providing a clean, rehearsed narrative. Hazel whimpered softly. I gently placed my hand on her knee. Then Dylan went for the emotional jugular. "Your Honor," he said, "I need to protect my relationship with my son. When he calls me crying, saying he's scared of me because of what his mother says, what am I supposed to do?" My mouth fell open slightly. Oliver had never cried to him. If anything, Ollie avoided calling because Dylan grilled him with questions that made him uncomfortable. But the judge didn't know that. She only heard a father pleading. Dylan stepped closer to the bench. "I'm begging the court to take this seriously. Maya is using our children as pawns to punish me." And there it was. The accusation meant to poison the judge's perception of me. I inhaled sharply. Ethan leaned in and whispered through clenched teeth, "He's lying through his teeth." I finally spoke when the judge turned to me. "Your Honor," I said calmly, "my children are not pawns. They're little humans who have been trying to navigate the emotional chaos Dylan creates. I have never told them to fear him. I've protected them when he lashes out and blames them for things outside their control." Before I could say more, Preston interjected, "Objection. Accusations without evidence." I closed my eyes for a moment, restraining myself. I knew they wanted me to appear reactive. Judge Blake raised a hand. "Miss Carter, you'll have the opportunity to respond fully." I nodded, exhaling slowly. But Dylan wasn't done. He stepped back and turned toward Ollie, softening his voice. "Oliver, buddy, can you tell the judge that you feel safe with me? Tell her Mommy doesn't force you to say things." Ollie's eyes widened. He looked at me, then at Dylan, then down at his tablet. I could see the stress building inside him, like a kettle about to whistle. "Your Honor," Dylan said, "I worry Maya is influencing Oliver's testimony. He shouldn't be afraid to speak honestly." That was the final push. Ollie inhaled sharply and stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. Everyone turned toward him, his small shoulders squared. His hands gripped his tablet tightly. His voice trembled, but didn't waver. "That's not true," he said firmly. The courtroom went still. Even Preston stopped flipping through his paperwork. Ollie continued, Dad's lying. Mom doesn't make me say anything. My breath caught in my throat. Then Ollie added, "But Dad did text me today. He said if I talk good about him, he'll buy me a car. And if I don't, he'll make sure I never get to go to college." His voice grew stronger, fueled by honesty and heartbreak. I saved the messages. I have them right here. Gasps filled the room. Judge Blake leaned forward slowly, and at that moment, I realized the conflict had just transformed into something much bigger than Dylan expected. The moment Ollie stood, everything changed. His chair scraped across the polished courtroom floor with a sharp sound that cut through the tension like a blade. Even Judge Blake paused, mid-note, her gaze shifting from Dylan to the small boy standing beside our table. My breath hitched. Ollie had always been thoughtful and gentle, the kind of kid who apologized when someone bumped into him. Seeing him stand tall, clutching his tablet like a shield, made my heart ache with both fear and pride. "Your Honor," Ollie began, his voice trembling but steady, "I need to tell the truth. Dad is lying." Dylan froze. His lawyer turned slowly toward him, brows raised, as if silently asking why he hadn't been warned about this. Judge Blake straightened in her seat. "Oliver," she said gently, "you may speak, but take your time. No one here will rush you." Ollie nodded once. His small hands tightened around the tablet. "Mom doesn't make me say anything, not ever. She tells me to be honest and to tell you what I really feel." He swallowed, his voice wavering just enough for my chest to ache. "But Dad told me something this morning." Dylan shook his head quickly. "Oliver, you're confused. Just sit down." "Mr. Reeves," Judge Blake interjected sharply, "you will not interrupt the child." The authority in her voice silenced the entire room. Ollie continued, lifting his tablet slightly. "Dad texted me before court. He said if I testified for him today, he'd buy me a car when I'm 16. But if I didn't help him, he said he'd make sure I never go to college." A collective gasp spread through the courtroom. Hazel flinched, gripping Clover tighter. Ethan's jaw clenched so hard I thought he might stand up too. I wanted to pull Ollie into my arms, shield him, tell him he didn't have to reveal anymore, but I knew this was his moment. He wasn't just defending me, he was defending himself. Ollie lifted the tablet higher. "I saved the messages. Do you want to see, Your Honor?" Judge Blake nodded once, her expression unreadable. "Oliver, please bring them to me." Preston Dillon's lawyer stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this is irregular. The child may be misinterpreting—" "Sit down, Mr. Hale," the judge said without raising her voice. "If Mr. Reeves pressured his son to alter testimony through bribery or threats, this court will hear it." Preston sat. Ollie stepped forward, one careful step at a time, his sneakers tapping softly against the floor. He walked between the tables, shoulders stiff, chin lifted, as if every ounce of courage he had ever possessed was being poured into that short walk. He reached the judge's bench and held the tablet up with both hands. Judge Blake leaned forward, her expression softening just enough to reassure him. She took the device and said, "Thank you, Oliver. Please go back to your seat." As he walked back, he looked at me. His eyes were wide, glassy, afraid he had done something wrong. I mouthed, "I'm proud of you." He took a shaky breath and slid into his seat beside Ethan, who placed a steady hand on his shoulder. The judge read the messages slowly. The courtroom was silent except for the faint sound of paper shifting and the hum of the overhead lights. Dylan fidgeted with his tie, then with his cuff, then with his jacket button, unable to sit still. When the judge's brows lowered in disapproval, he finally spoke. "Your Honor, those messages are being taken out of context. I was joking with my son." Judge Blake lifted her eyes, her expression now unmistakably sharp. "You threatened your child's future as leverage for testimony. That is not a joke." She set the tablet down firmly. "Mr. Reeves, this is coercion." Dylan's posture collapsed a little. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Preston rubbed his forehead. "Your Honor, perhaps we will address this matter fully," she said, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours, but Ollie wasn't done. He spoke again, softly but clearly. "Your Honor, I just want everyone to stop fighting. I want to stay with Mom because she listens when I'm scared. Dad gets mad a lot, and I don't want him to be mad at me today." That was it. Not a rehearsed statement, not a coach speech, just a boy telling the truth. The judge nodded slowly. "Thank you, Oliver. Your honesty is important to this court." Hazel peered around my arm and whispered, "Mommy, is Ollie in trouble?" I shook my head gently. "No, baby. He's being brave." The turning point wasn't just Ollie's words. It was the way the entire courtroom seemed to shift around him. The narrative Dylan tried to build, of me as the manipulative parent, crumbled in seconds, and the momentum, for the first time in years, was finally on our side. Judge Blake held Ollie's tablet in her hands for several long seconds, her eyes scanning the text messages that had shifted the entire direction of the hearing. The courtroom was silent except for the faint rustle of her robe as she turned each screenshot. With every passing moment, Dylan's composure eroded. His leg bounced under the table, his jaw clenched, and a bead of sweat formed at his temple. He knew the truth was out, and he had run out of places to hide. Finally, Judge Blake placed the tablet down with deliberate calm. She folded her hands, her expression stern enough to drain the color from Dylan's face. "Mr. Reeves," she said, "do you deny sending these messages to your son?" Dylan cleared his throat and attempted a confident tone, but it cracked midway. "Your Honor, those texts were meant as a playful conversation. Oliver doesn't understand sarcasm yet. I was joking." The judge raised one eyebrow, unimpressed. "Threatening to interfere with your son's future education is not a joke. Promising a luxury item in exchange for altered testimony is not a joke." She tapped the tablet lightly. "These messages are coercive, manipulative, and deeply inappropriate." Preston, the lawyer who had so confidently accused me minutes earlier, now sat motionless, hands clasped tightly in his lap. He didn't offer a defense. He didn't object. He didn't even look at Dylan. Judge Blake continued, "This court takes parental manipulation very seriously, especially when it is directed toward a minor child. Mr. Reeves, you placed your own interests above your son's well-being. You attempted to influence this hearing using intimidation." She leaned forward slightly. "That behavior is unacceptable." Dylan stood abruptly. "Your Honor, please, I can explain." "You will sit down," she instructed sharply. Her voice didn't rise, but its firmness cut through the courtroom like steel. Dylan froze, then slowly lowered himself back into his chair. Hazel flinched at his sudden movement and pressed herself into my side. I wrapped an arm around her, grounding both of us. Ethan leaned closer to Ollie, whispering a quiet, "You did great, kiddo." Judge Blake straightened her papers. "Before I render my decision, I want to make one thing clear. Children are not bargaining chips. They are not leverage. They are not tools to win or lose a case." Her gaze shifted between both tables. Family court exists to protect their emotional and physical well-being, not to referee parental power struggles. Dylan swallowed hard. His polished facade had cracked completely. His shoulders slumped, his gaze darting around the room like he was searching for someone who could rescue him. There was no one. The judge continued, her voice steady. "In light of today's evidence, the court finds that Mr. Reeves has engaged in behavior detrimental to Oliver's emotional safety. Therefore, his request for primary custody is denied." Dylan's head snapped up. "What?" he whispered, shock twisting his features. Judge Blake wasn't finished. Furthermore, effective immediately, Mr. Reeves' visitation will be supervised until a full psychological assessment is completed. All communication with the children shall occur through monitored channels. Any attempt to pressure or intimidate them will result in suspension of visitation privileges. A stunned silence spread across the courtroom, the kind that only appears when the truth finally crushes a long-held lie. Dylan leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. "Your Honor, please, this will ruin my relationship with my kids." "You did that," she replied, "not this court." His mouth opened, then closed again, his expression unraveling into disbelief. Then came the final blow. Judge Blake turned toward me. "Ms. Carter, you are granted full decision-making authority regarding both children until further review. The court acknowledges your consistent efforts to provide stability." My throat tightened. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then she addressed Ollie directly, softening her tone. "Oliver, thank you for your honesty today. It is not easy to speak up, especially when adults are arguing around you. You were brave, and this court respects what you did." Ollie's eyes glistened, and he gave a small nod. Ethan squeezed his shoulder proudly. When the judge stood to adjourn the hearing, Preston quietly closed his briefcase, not in victory, but in defeat. Dylan sat motionless, staring at the table, his hands trembling slightly. All the arrogance he had walked in with was gone. As we gathered our things, Ollie tugged at my sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, "is Dad going to be really mad?" I knelt beside him. "Your dad will have to deal with the choices he made. You did nothing wrong." I placed my hands on his cheeks gently. "You told the truth. That's what mattered today." Hazel hugged my leg, looking up at her brother with admiration. "Ollie was brave," she said quietly. Ethan stepped closer, resting a hand on my shoulder. "He didn't just speak up," he said. "He changed everything." He was right. The moment the judge read those messages, the years of manipulation that Dylan had used to control us finally shattered. And for the first time in a long time, justice wasn't just a word on paper. It was something we could feel. When we stepped out of the courtroom, it felt like walking out of a storm cellar after a tornado. The air smelled the same, the sky looked the same, but something inside me had shifted so completely that the world felt unfamiliar. I held Hazel's tiny hand on one side and Ollie's on the other. Their palms were warm, their steps uncertain, and their silence told me they were processing everything in their own way. The courthouse doors closed behind us with a heavy thud, as if sealing the chaos inside. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Ollie looked up at me first. His eyes weren't filled with fear or confusion anymore. They were exhausted, yes, but calm. "Did I get you in trouble?" he asked in a small voice, like he was still unsure of the consequences for telling the truth. I knelt in front of him, brushing the hair off his forehead. "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "You helped the judge see what was really happening. You didn't do anything wrong. You were brave, braver than most adults could ever be." Hazel wrapped her arms around my waist and pressed her face into my stomach. "I don't like when Daddy yells," she whispered. I closed my eyes for a moment, my heart aching. "I know, honey. That's why we're going to take things one day at a time. Things will be calmer now. You don't have to be scared." Ethan stepped up beside us, setting a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You did good, Maya," he said. "You didn't break today. You didn't let him twist who you are." I let out a shaky breath. "I didn't do anything. Ollie did everything." Ethan looked down at my son with a faint smile. "Yeah, and he didn't learn that courage from Dylan." We walked to the parking lot slowly, the weight of the morning still lingering on our shoulders. When we reached the car, Ollie hesitated before getting in. He stood there staring at the courthouse, his brows furrowed. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. He shrugged. I didn't want Dad to be mad at me, but I didn't want to lie either." He looked up at me again. "I'm tired of being in the middle." Those words cut deeper than anything Dylan had said in court. My son, my sweet, gentle 8-year-old, had been carrying the weight of adult conflict for far too long. I crouched beside him again and rested my forehead lightly against his. "You're not in the middle anymore," I whispered. "I won't let anyone put you there again." We spent the rest of the day at home. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't answer emails, didn't check social media. Instead, I sat with my children on the couch while Ollie played with Hazel's dolls to make her laugh. Every time Hazel giggled, a piece of the tension inside me loosened. I watched them both and wondered how much they'd been holding in, how much I had missed while trying to survive each day's crisis. Later that evening, after dinner and baths and quiet playtime, I tucked Hazel into bed. She clutched Clover, her stuffed rabbit, and asked, "Is Daddy still going to see us?" "Yes," I said honestly, smoothing her blanket, "but it's going to happen in a way that keeps you safe." She nodded sleepily. "Okay, as long as he doesn't get mad." When I stepped into the hallway, I found Ollie waiting for me. He stood there awkwardly, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Mom? Yeah, baby?" He didn't speak right away. Then his voice cracked just slightly. "I thought Dad would stop loving me if I told the judge." My heart broke and swelled at the same time. I knelt down and pulled him into my arms. "Love doesn't disappear because the truth comes out. I whispered. "Real love isn't scared of honesty. Your dad is going to have to deal with the choices he made, but that doesn't make what you did wrong. You protected yourself. You protected Hazel. And you protected me." He buried his face into my shoulder, finally letting the tears he'd been holding spill out. I held him for a long time, rocking gently, wishing I could erase every moment he'd ever felt like he needed to choose between parents. When he finally pulled back, his face was wet, but his eyes were steady. "I'm glad you're not in trouble," he said quietly. I smiled. "Thanks to you, none of us are." That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and let myself process everything. The court decision meant safety, stability, and breathing room. It meant my children wouldn't have to navigate Dylan's outbursts alone. But beyond the legal victories, a deeper truth settled in me. My son had stood up for himself. My daughter had clung to me because she felt safe. And I had finally seen, with complete clarity, that the strength we carried as a family wasn't fragile. It had survived manipulation, fear, confusion, and uncertainty. It had survived him. As I sat there, I realized something. Ollie didn't just tell the truth. He reminded me of the kind of mother I was fighting to be: steadfast, honest, protective, and grounded in love. The biggest lesson wasn't about Dylan's downfall or the judge's ruling. It was about the power of courage, even when it comes from the smallest voices in the room. And as I turned off the kitchen light and headed to bed, one truth settled into my heart with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. My children and I were finally stepping into a future not defined by fear, but by healing. When I look back on that day, it doesn't feel like the end of a custody battle. It feels like the moment my children and I finally stepped out of the shadows Dylan kept pulling us into. It was the day my son found his voice, my daughter found her safety, and I found the strength I kept doubting I had. We still have healing to do. There are still hard conversations and careful boundaries ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I'm not living in fear of the next blow-up, the next accusation, or the next courtroom shock. My home is quiet again. My kids laugh without flinching, and I can finally breathe knowing that the truth, our truth, was louder than any lie ever told about us. If you've ever been through something like this, if you've ever fought for your kids while feeling like the world was stacked against you, I hope this story reminds you that courage shows up in unexpected ways, sometimes through small hands holding a tablet, sometimes through a voice trembling but determined, sometimes through the person you're trying hardest to protect. Thank you for listening to our story, and thank you for letting me share a part of my life that changed everything. If you felt something while watching this video, if it made you think, or if it gave you strength, please like the video, share it, comment your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this. Your support means more than you know. It keeps these stories alive. It keeps our community growing. And it reminds people going through similar battles that they're not alone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you in the next one.